Fucking catch a mockery. Moriarty Pentila, Moriarty Snake equals a cocktail breath for unleashing the beast. Iho wore a mock for nigh at least. Dredgella, he's beating some fella. Tahan, are you seeing shot? And it's for sure straight to Silla. Fucked into the back of the Jeep, he falls asleep. He does it every week. Chucky or La, get the Brits out, lad. A one-way ticket, please. I've lost my bus pass. It's Jackson up, he's looking some pins, man. The Kylie fucking Freegianish, man. Keep her at the fucker, fucking fuck off. Jesus said on the cross. 2 tins of bush, 20 figs, and the dog is the lost. Who's next? Me, miss. Some would you like a bag? While you're shopping at your nose, I see your ankle tag. Fuck you, curfew, dislocated eye socket. Overnight cop shop with 2 grams in his pocket. Loves his reputation, now he's known for being a rocket. In his dreams, 9mm loaded. I'm a hitch, double OD. Low lace, come with what they say about me. Cause I'm a hitch, double OD. Low lace, come with what they say about me.
A dog with a job, what the fuck is that? When our poor Mickey's just sitting in the flat, sipping on his cans and smoking rollies. Cause all the best jobs are taken by the doggies.
Squidgy black, yeah, crack, and must blue for hand lab. Beat the fast, then assess, get that note on bank cash. Jack and Nish, hit the stash, want to pass, it's an art. Jack a goose, Coquelina, solo Miriam, Shaw, Ash. Jack.
It's gonna be a bloodbath. It's gonna be a bloodbath. It's gonna be a bloodbath. It's gonna be a bloodbath.
Throw a hook, a jab and a boot. I sneak a quick tooth, then I fire another boot. For calling me a fruit, for trying to take the loot. But Billy won't be bothering any more hoots.
Nish, couple of cash, do you want it in your chest or your knees or your head? DJ Provey has the lead. You can beg, you can plead, you can tell us what we need. You can change your name,
but they're all the fucking same. I'm a hitch, double OD. Low lace, come with what they say about me. Cause I'm a hitch, double OD. Low lace, come with what they say about me. I'm a hitch, double OD. Low lace, come with what they say about me. Cause I'm a hitch, double OD. Low lace, come with what they say about me.
Caught in a cracker shot.
No Mickey's what is it?
Sure, Johnny Wallace or push.
Hey Hitler, you probably didn't even hate the Jews. That was just the meth making you crazy, dog.
How much does it cost for fascism? How much do the taxpayers have to pay for a fascist country?
Stop being cowards, because the collective cowardice of you and people like you is what has led to the circumstances of today. You can stop letting the enemy dictate the terms of your struggle. They're evil. They are actively doing evil. So treat them like the evil that they are.
The time to start is now, right? The time to plant a tree is 10 years ago, and the second best time is now. Strikes are the most effective way to stop profit, get demand, and force policy changes. If you can shut down profit, you can make any politician do anything.
I don't want to be part of the system as it works.
It's time to stop pretending otherwise. It's time to be ruthless, and time to afford them the same amount of grace that they give to their Palestinian victims, because they are only going to get more and more ruthless with their victims if you don't.
Mic check 1 2. We'll start off with headlines and then we'll go into more specific stories. So we'll start with Monday the 23rd. All right, here we go.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Supreme Court struck down President Trump's global tariffs Friday, ruling in a 6-3 decision that he didn't have the emergency powers he claimed to have to impose tariffs. President Trump immediately lashed out at the justices of the high court, vowing other alternatives are available to him to pursue tariffs, and announced a 10% global tariff over the current rate. On Saturday, Trump raised his global tariffs to 15%. This time, Trump issued the latest round of tariffs under a different law, Section 122 of the Trade Act of 1974, which allows him to impose up to 15% tariffs for 150 days. The tariffs are set to take effect starting February 24th.
The Supreme Court's ruling on tariffs is deeply disappointing, and I'm ashamed of certain members of the court. Absolutely.
This is so funny. I was watching the headlines roll in for this, and it was like 8 hours ago, Trump announces global tariffs. 6 hours ago, Trump announces a disappointment in rejection of his global tariffs. Okay.
Ashamed for not having the courage to do what's right for our country. It's my opinion that the court has
So
been
pissy.
swayed by foreign interests and a political movement that is far smaller than people would ever think.
Soon after the Supreme Court's ruling, Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker sent a letter to President Trump demanding tariff refunds for every family in Illinois. The letter reads, quote, "The Supreme Court has ruled this is yet one more unconstitutional act by you and your administration. This letter and the attached invoice stand as an official notice that the compensation is owed to the people of Illinois, and if you do not comply, we will pursue further action," he said. We'll have more on this story after headlines. U.S. and Iranian negotiators are set to meet in Geneva Thursday to discuss a new nuclear proposal. According to Axios, U.S. officials say this is likely the last chance President Trump will give Iran before ordering.
I'm going to listen on my headphones and go put some milk in this tea here. It is really hot and has some room in the cup, so let's freaking go.
A U.S.-Israeli military operation that could directly target Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei. It comes as the U.S. has been building up warships and fighter jets near Iran, deploying 2 aircraft carriers, the largest USS Gerald Ford and the USS Abraham Lincoln. This is President Trump's special envoy, Steve Witkoff.
I don't want to use the word frustrated. It's almost because he understands he's got plenty of alternatives. But it's curious. He's curious as to why they haven't...
A betrayer of
I don't want to
Gaza.
use the word capitulated, but why they haven't capitulated.
On Sunday, anti-government protests in Iran erupted on university campuses in the capital, Tehran, and the northeastern city of Mashhad. In videos on social media, the student protesters appeared to wear black to mourn the thousands of demonstrators killed by Iranian security forces in last month's protests. The Iranian government has arrested 40,000 people in connection with the anti-government demonstrations last month. At least 3 people were killed in another U.S. military strike on a boat in the Eastern Pacific. The U.S. Southern Command confirmed the Friday attack, claiming again without evidence the boat had been targeted for traveling along a supposed drug trafficking route. CNN reports at least 148 people have been killed since September, when the Trump administration began its series of military strikes on boats in the Caribbean and Pacific, attacks that have been widely condemned as illegal. This comes as Cuba has been withdrawing security advisors and doctors from Venezuela in the aftermath of the U.S. attack and abduction of the Venezuelan president Nicolas Maduro and his wife in early January. Reuters reports the move comes as Venezuela's interim leader, Delcy Rodriguez, is facing growing pressure from the U.S. to cut ties with Cuba as the Trump administration seeks to further isolate the island to topple the Cuban government. At least 32 Cuban officers were killed in the U.S. attack on Venezuela last month. The officers part of Maduro's security detail. Mexican security forces killed Mexico's most wanted drug lord, Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho, on Sunday in the town of Tapalpa in Jalisco State. The U.S. had provided intelligence to Mexican authorities for the operation. The U.S. had placed a $15 million bounty on El Mencho, who led the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, which is a designated terrorist organization in the United States. Following his death, violence erupted in multiple cities across Mexico. In Guadalajara, Jalisco's capital, gunfire was reported and armed men reportedly set a gas station ablaze. Vehicles were set on fire near beachfront hotels in the resort city of Puerto Vallarta. The U.S. Embassy in Mexico urged Americans to shelter in place in multiple states across Mexico. Tourists were left stranded in Puerto Vallarta as Air Canada, Delta, American Airlines, and Alaskan Airlines all announced they were canceling flights to and from the town's airport due to the ongoing security situation. Israeli strikes have killed at least 12 people in eastern and southern Lebanon in another violation of the ceasefire deal with Hezbollah that went into effect November 2024. Lebanon's Ministry of Public Health said at least 2 people were killed in an Israeli attack on the Ain al-Hilweh camp, the country's largest Palestinian refugee camp. The Israeli military claimed to target Hamas. The group denies it has training facilities in Lebanon's refugee camps. According to the UN, the Israeli military has launched more than 10,000 attacks since it agreed to a so-called ceasefire with Hezbollah. In the occupied West Bank, calls for justice are growing following the death of 19-year-old Palestinian-American Nasrallah Mohammed Jamal Abu Sayyam, who succumbed to his injuries last week after he was shot by an Israeli settler. The teen was fired at when he tried to stop Israeli settlers from raiding his village to steal sheep. His family's demanded accountability from the U.S. government, with the State Department releasing a statement this weekend that said it expects a full, thorough, and transparent investigation into the teen's death. The Trump administration last year lifted sanctions on Israeli settlers involved in violence against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank.
Like that's going to happen.
Was born in Philadelphia. He's
like
at least the 11th U.S. citizen
brought.
killed by Israeli soldiers and settlers since 2022. Arab and Muslim nations are condemning recent remarks by Mike Huckabee, the U.S. ambassador to Israel, after he claimed Israel has a right to expand into most of the Middle East. Huckabee made the comments in an interview with a right-wing commentator.
We don't even investigate lynchings in our own country. What makes you think we're going to investigate them in Israel, in the West Bank?
Commentator Tucker Carlson. Here's the exchange.
Does Israel have the right to that land? Because you're appealing to Genesis. No. You're saying that's the original deed.
It would be fine if they took it all, but I don't think that's what we're talking about here today.
What would be fine? Well, it's exactly what we're talking about today.
But here's what I don't think
you think it would be fine if the state of Israel took over all of Jordan?
They don't want to take it over.
The League of Arab States said, quote, statements of this nature extremist and lacking.
That is a lie. Israel wants to take over all of Gaza, all of Palestine, well, the rest of it, and they want to expand into Libya. They want to expand into Egypt. They want to expand their empire across the world, or bring about the end times. That's Mike Huckabee is deluded as fuck.
Any sound basis serve only to inflame sentiments and stir religious,
or he's just lying.
National emotions, unquote. An autopsy report by the Democratic National Committee on the 2024 election concluded Kamala Harris lost significant support because of the Biden administration's policy on Gaza. That's according to reporting by Axios. The DNC's report still hasn't been released to the public. The Institute for Middle East Understanding, IMEU, policy project is accusing the DNC of withholding its autopsy report, in part because of its findings.
You don't need a whole autopsy report. All you need is her on camera saying, I wouldn't do anything different than my predecessor who facilitated a genocide, man.
On Israel. The IMEU policy project reportedly told the DNC that the Biden administration lost its credibility among young people and progressives over its support for Israel. Hamid Bendas, a spokesperson for the IMEU policy project, said during the meeting, quote, the DNC shared with us that their own data also found that policy was, in their words, a net negative in the 2024 election, unquote. In Britain, at least 12 activists
Welcome
with
to the
Palestine
stream.
Action have reunited with their families
Aliana.
after months in jail. Among the group released on bail Friday were 4 hunger strikers. Only one of the 18 activists was not granted conditional bail. Their trial is scheduled for April. That's according to the BBC. Earlier this month, 6 Palestine Action protesters were found not guilty of aggravated burglary, even after they admitted to breaking into a factory operated by the Israeli military firm Elbit. The British government has banned Palestine Action under its Terrorism Act over direct action protests against Israel's war on Gaza. A 23-year-old U.S. citizen was fatally shot by an ICE agent in South Texas nearly a year before federal immigration agents killed Renee Good and Alex Preti in Minneapolis as part of Trump's immigration crackdown. But ICE's connection to the March 2025 fatal shooting of Ruben Ray Martinez in South Padre Island was only made public last week in reports by Newsweek and the New York Times. Martinez was reportedly shot multiple times by the ICE agent, who's unnamed, after he didn't follow orders to exit his car. His mother told the Times he'd been in the area to celebrate his birthday at the time he was killed. She described him as hardworking, telling the New York Times, quote, he was a good kid. He never got in trouble, unquote. Martinez worked at an Amazon warehouse in San Antonio.
It's so fucking sad. Like, what do you even say as a parent? Like, it doesn't matter if he was a good kid or a bad kid. He doesn't deserve to get shot, you know what I mean? Like, it's just when, God, dude, this poor kid, 23 years old.
A powerful winter storm, which meteorologists call a bomb cyclone, has pummeled and paralyzed the northeastern United States, leaving over 40 million people under a blizzard warning by this morning. More than 260,000 customers in the mid-Atlantic region are without power, mostly in New Jersey and Delaware. New York City Mayor Zohran Mamdani declared a state of emergency on Sunday and ordered a citywide travel ban between 9 p.m. Sunday and noon Monday. Many school districts, including New York City and Boston, have declared a snow day with no remote learning or in-person learning today. Thousands of flights have been canceled nationwide, with New York area airports experiencing the most disruptions. Scientific experts have long warned the worsening climate crisis is leading to more intense winter storms. University of Pennsylvania researcher Annabelle Horton said data shows, quote, that these really intense, really destructive nor'easters will, in fact, only get more destructive and more powerful in a changing climate, unquote. U.S. Secret Service agents fatally shot an armed man who breached the secure perimeter at President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach, Florida, Sunday. The Associated Press reports the man has been identified as 21-year-old Austin Tucker Martin from North Carolina. He reportedly drove into the secure perimeter as another vehicle was exiting the resort. He had a gas can and a shotgun, according to Secret Service. Martin had been reported missing by his family a few days ago. Trump and the First Lady Melania Trump were at the White House at the time of the incident. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the war.
Oopsie daisy. That's tough.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. The Supreme Court struck down President Trump's Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. In the United Kingdom, authorities arrested, then released Peter Mandelson, the former British ambassador to the United States, over allegations he passed confidential government information to the late convicted sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein. The London Metropolitan Police had started its investigation into Mandelson earlier this month and said it had arrested him, quote, on suspicion of misconduct in public office. Mandelson's arrest comes just days after former Prince Andrew was arrested for the same offense.
That's such a crazy
served as a government
photo.
minister between 1997 and 2001, again for...
Dude. The president of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, he looks just as much like he's being kidnapped as Maduro did in that picture of him holding the water bottle. He's... Jesus Christ. Bro knows he's in trouble.
Was arrested for the same offense. Mandelson served as a government minister between 1997 and 2001, again from 2008 to 2010, fired from his diplomatic post in September last year as more information about his relationship with Epstein was released. There are now growing calls for British Prime Minister Keir Starmer to resign, since Starmer tapped Mandelson to be Britain's top U.S. envoy. This is Conservative Party leader Kemi Badenoch.
This is the defining moment of Keir Starmer's premiership. Watching the man who he appointed to the highest position in our diplomatic service getting arrested by police, I think is an image that's going to stay with all of us for many, many years to come. And when people think about Keir Starmer and his premiership, they will see the arrest of Peter Mandelson as the defining moment.
Bard College has hired an outside law firm to conduct an independent investigation into communications between the college's longtime president, Leon Botstein, and the late convicted sex offender, Jeffrey Epstein. The release of the Epstein files reveals Botstein traveled to Epstein's Island in 2012. In 2013, the Bard president wrote to Epstein, quote, "I greatly cherish this new friendship. I have real admiration for how you go about doing things." Peter Attia, a CBS News contributor and longevity influencer, has resigned from his post as his emails with the late convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein were released to the public. Attia was recruited and hired by CBS's new editor-in-chief, Barry Weiss, in January, just days before the release of the Epstein files. In the emails, Attia provided medical advice and arranged testing for Epstein. In an email sent to Epstein in June 2015, Attia wrote, quote, "You know, the biggest problem with becoming friends with you, the life you lead is so outrageous, and yet I can't tell a soul," he said. Other emails were far more graphic. In 2008, Epstein was released from a Florida state jail after serving a 13-month term for his conviction soliciting sex from a minor. An NPR investigation finds the Justice Department failed to release some of the Epstein files related to allegations that President Trump sexually abused a minor. According to NPR, the additional files include 50 pages of FBI interviews and notes from conversations with a woman who accused Trump of sexual abuse when she was a minor. This comes despite Attorney General Pam Bondi and Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche, who was Trump's personal attorney, sending a letter to Congress earlier this month claiming no records were withheld or redacted, quote, on the basis of embarrassment, reputational harm, or political sensitivity, including to any government official, public figure, or foreign dignitary, unquote. The U.S. military has blown up another boat in the Caribbean, killing at least 3 people. The U.S. Southern Command published a 20-second video clip of the strike Monday, showing a small boat suddenly exploding. Trump officials again provided no evidence that the boat or the people on board were involved with drug trafficking.
How many is that now?
This is at least the 3rd such attack over the course of a week, bringing the death toll from U.S. boat strikes in the Caribbean and Pacific to an estimated 150 people. Several legal and human rights experts have said the attacks amount to extrajudicial killings. In Mexico, schools in Jalisco and several other states remain closed as heavily armed Mexican security forces have flooded the streets following a series of reprisal attacks by cartel members in response to the killing of Mexico's most wanted drug lord, Nemesio Rubén Oseguera Cervantes, also known as El Mencho. More than 70 people have died since Sunday's operation. The country remains in high alert. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum spoke from Mexico City Monday, refuting news the United States had aided the attempted capture.
All operations are carried out by federal forces. There is no U.S. participation in the operation. What there is, as we have said here several times, is a great deal of information sharing. The understanding with the United States is based primarily on the exchange of intelligence information.
We'll have more on this story later in the broadcast. A former ICE attorney and training instructor who quit his job last week in protest has accused the federal agency of lying to Congress about having drastically slashed its training standards for new officers. During a forum Monday held by congressional Democrats, Ryan Schwank called ICE's training program deficient, defective, and broken, as the agency has eliminated hundreds of hours of vital training courses, including on use of force, how to safely handle firearms, and protocols to detain immigrants. Ahead of the forum, Democrats unveiled in...
Hold on. You look like that and your name is Schwank? Bro.
Firearms and protocols to detain immigrants. Ahead of the forum, Democrats unveiled internal documents provided to Democratic Senator Richard Blumenthal by DHS whistleblowers detailing that new ICE recruits receive nearly 250 fewer hours of training than before, with the agency also shortening training programs to just 42 days. The revelations come as the Department of Homeland Security is rapidly expanding its hiring of new agents, which has raised alarm on the agency's eroding screening and trading standards. Ryan Schwenk's testimony comes just weeks after ICE Director Todd Lyons testified.
Look at that.
Hiring of new agents, which has raised.
Look at the numbers. $50,000 signing bonus, $600,000 or $60,000 student loan repayment, and 25% premium pay. You do not need an undergraduate degree? Means you don't have to graduate high school? You may be entitled asterisk up to these benefits. America needs you, Uncle Sam, from the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. America has been invaded by criminals and predators. We need you to get them out. Fucking Nazi shit, dude. And the numbers, I mean, you look at these numbers and you look at the requirements, this is a bribe. This is bribing the worst among us. Can you be a felon? I mean, where do they fucking draw the line? I mean, you have to be able to handle a firearm, I suppose. So you can't be a felon. But, I mean, they're looking for these, like, young, white supremacist, doomer-ass nobodies with nothing better to do than to terrorize their neighbors because they've fantasized about it in their fucking Discord servers. God damn, dude. By the way, this is how much it's worth for you to not terrorize your neighbors right now. That's the value. For you to not be a fucking Nazi, that's worth almost 100K. That's worth around 100K, almost. In the United States of America. There you go.
Alarm on the agency's eroding screening and trading standards. Ryan Schwenk's testimony comes just weeks after ICE Director Todd Lyons testified in front of separate House and Senate committees, claiming the agency had not reduced the, quote, meat of the training, unquote. This week's findings contradict that. In related news, the only passenger in the car and a key witness in the fatal shooting of Ruben Ray Martinez, the 23-year-old U.S. citizen killed by an ICE agent in South Texas last year, reportedly died in a car crash this weekend. Joshua Orta had planned to speak up as the Trump administration lied about the circumstances of the fatal shooting. Palestinians in Gaza are observing the holy month of Ramadan amidst Israel's attacks and near total blockade on food and humanitarian aid. Families have gathered across Gaza for iftar, a meal at sunset to break the daily fast. This is Reda Abu Taima speaking from a camp in Khan Yunis for orphan children.
After the suffering that our children faced, this is the first Ramadan that we gather on one table after the ceasefire took place. The children are enjoying these atmospheres, especially at the orphanage camp. All of them gather and they have the same suffering. This is a joyful moment during Ramadan to celebrate with the children and give them support.
The cost of food has skyrocketed in Gaza due to Israel's restrictions and blockade. An analysis by Al Jazeera found food prices in Gaza at times have spiked by more than 700%. In more related news, Israeli soldiers fired nearly 1,000 bullets, at least 8 of them at point-blank range, killing 15 Palestinian aid workers last year in a massacre in South Gaza. That's according to a joint investigation by the independent research groups Earshot and Forensic Architecture published Monday. Israel then tried to cover up the attack on the humanitarian aid convoy that included several workers with the Palestine Red Crescent Society and at least one member of UNRWA, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees.
They literally tried to cover it up. There's ambulance parts that they're pulling out of the sand. They buried a fucking ambulance. At least one.
President Trump blasted media reports about General Dan Kane, chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, warning him about the risks of attacking Iran. On Truth Social, President Trump wrote, quote, General Kane, like all of us, would like not to see war. But if a decision is made on going against Iran at a military level, it's his opinion that it will be something easily won, unquote. It comes as the Washington Post reports General Kane warned the lack of critical munitions and support from regional allies would endanger U.S. troops, as the U.S. munitions stockpile has been significantly depleted by support for Israel and Ukraine. Axios is also reporting General Kane was, quote, all in on the Venezuela.
That's so funny. Pulling up to Iran's front door, ready to go, ready to invade. Oh, I thought we were going to invade last weekend, but, turns out our allies won't back us up, and we gave all our bullets to fucking Israel. We gave all our missiles to Israel. Trump's like, I listen to him. He's a great guy, but he tells me it'd be easily won. We lack critical munitions. We don't have the support. An operation like this would put troops in danger. Come on, man.
Venezuela operation, but is now more cautious about Iran. Meanwhile, The Guardian's reporting President Trump is basing his decision to strike Iran on the advice provided by his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, and his special envoy, Steve Witkoff, on whether Iran is serious about giving up its nuclear weapons program. The U.S. and Iran are scheduled to hold a third round.
These two jokers deciding if we're going to attack Iran. Yeah, we're not going to attack Iran.
On whether Iran is serious about giving up its nuclear weapons program. The U.S. and Iran are scheduled to hold a third round of indirect talks in Geneva Thursday. Meanwhile, Iranian students are continuing their protests for a third consecutive day as anti-government demonstrations have spread to Tehran's Al-Zahra University. Students reportedly chanted "Death to the dictator," referring to Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. It comes over a month after Iranian authorities violently suppressed anti-government mass street demonstrations, reportedly killing thousands. 4 years ago today, Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. It's since become the biggest land war in Europe since World War II. Today, Russia controls just about a fifth of Ukraine's territory. The Center for Strategic and International Studies says Russia suffered 1.2 million casualties, including up to 325,000 troop deaths between February 2022 and last December, while Ukraine suffered between 500,000 to 600,000 military casualties, including up to 140,000 deaths. This is Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky.
And today, we must be just as determined and strong as we were when the invasion began. The threat hasn't become smaller. Yes, we are holding Russia back, but we have not yet guaranteed security. And only together can we do this together in Europe. Yes, together with America.
Federal Judge Aileen Cannon has permanently barred the Justice Department from releasing special counsel Jack Smith's report into the classified documents case against President Trump. Judge Cannon was appointed by President Trump. In 2023, special counsel Jack Smith charged Trump with 40 counts of illegally retaining classified information and obstructing government efforts to retrieve the materials. Cannon later dismissed those charges in 2024. Back in December, Smith testified before Congress in a closed-door deposition that his team has uncovered, quote, powerful evidence that showed Trump willfully retained highly classified documents after he left office in January 2021, storing them at a social club, including in a bathroom and a ballroom where events and gatherings took place, unquote. President Trump is set to deliver his 2026 State of the Union address to a joint session of Congress tonight. Some Democrats are planning to skip the address and hold a rally called the People's State of the Union on the National Mall instead. Senators Ed Markey, Jeff Merkley, Chris Murphy, Tina Smith, and Chris Van Hollen, and Congress members Yasmin Ansari, Becca Balint, Greg Casar, Veronica Escobar, Pramila Jayapal, and Delia Ramirez, and Bonnie Watson-Coleman are expected to join the rally. In a statement, Senator Murphy said, quote, these aren't normal times, and showing up for the speech puts a veneer of legitimacy on the corruption and lawlessness that's defined President Trump's second term, unquote. It comes as the House Democratic leader, Hakeem Jeffries, announced he's inviting the family of the Reverend Jesse Jackson to the State of the Union address tonight. House Speaker Mike Johnson denied a request for Reverend Jackson to lie in honor at the U.S. Capitol. The national president of the NAACP, Derek Johnson, said, quote, Mike Johnson will defend a president who wants to unlawfully nationalize elections, but won't authorize a civil rights legend to lie in honor. That tells you everything you need to know about Mike Johnson and his gross disregard for our Constitution and our democracy. And fallout from the BAFTA Awards ceremony in London is growing. That's Britain's equivalent of the Oscars. A BAFTA judge, filmmaker Jonte Richardson, has quit, citing the organization.
I don't think Mike Johnson's legacy and his spitting in the face of the Constitution and our country, is that interesting. I think it has more to do with the Epstein files, like so many other politicians, and it has a lot to do with Israel and him being a Zionist. That's the worst thing about Mike Johnson.
Handling of a racist incident during Sunday's award ceremony, when Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo presented the award for Best Visual Effects. A Tourette syndrome campaigner shouted the N-word twice. The BBC failed to edit out the word from the broadcast, which aired 2 hours after the live show, while cutting the phrase Free Palestine from an acceptance speech by Akinola Davies Jr., a British-Nigerian filmmaker. Jonte Richardson wrote on LinkedIn, quote, after considerable soul-searching, I feel compelled to withdraw from the BAFTA Emerging Talent Judging Panel. The organization's handling of the unfortunate Tourette's N-word incident last night at the awards was utterly unforgivable. I cannot and will not contribute my time, energy, and expertise to an organization that's repeatedly failed to safeguard the dignity of its black guests, members, and the black creative community, Jonte Richardson wrote.
Damn, you were able to edit out Free Palestine, but you couldn't edit out the N-word being shouted out? That's crazy, dude.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman in New York, joined by Democracy Now!'s Juan Gonzalez in Chicago. Hi, Juan.
Hi, Amy, and welcome to all of our listeners and viewers across the country.
And then it was the 24th, so now we'll do the 25th. Welcome to the stream if you're just joining. We're just doing headline recaps. Okay.
The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Trump boasted about his record on the economy and doubled down on his harsh immigration policies during a State of the Union address before Congress Tuesday night. At 1 hour and 48 minutes, it was the
God. I'm glad I didn't tune in for that shit.
Longest State of the Union in recent history. President Trump ignored the challenges people are facing with the economy and instead touted the stock market and lower gas prices. Before Trump's speech, Democratic Congressmember Al Green of Texas held up a sign that read, "Black people aren't apes," referring to President Trump posting a racist video.
That picture is crazy. Hold up. Let me get my camera out of the way. Holy fuck, look at that picture. God damn. Holy fucking shit, dude. Yeah, did that harsh your mellow a little bit, Trump, before going up into the State of the Union address? Holy fucking shit, man. Whoa. That picture is gonna go down in history. Like, I mean, if not in textbooks, it's gonna be in the fucking Wikipedia article, man. In Donald Trump's racist history. I'm pretty sure there's an article just on Trump's lies, Trump's controversies, etc. People of Wikipedia are like, oh, you want the file on Trump? Just fucking Charlie Day smoking a cigarette. You want to talk about the mail? I've been dying to talk about the mail. Oh man, the presidency of Donald Trump, the second presidency of Donald Trump, false or misleading statements by Donald Trump. May I recommend an on-topic song? Yes, please. I'm just perusing Wikipedia for some Donald Trump articles. Just holding my finger to the wind, seeing what kind of, like, articles there are. 2 weeks. Analysts have noted that Trump's frequent use of a time limit of 2 weeks of taking action, a deadline which does usually not come to fruition. He has used such a time period in statements about Ukraine and Russia, Iran, tariffs. The habit has been observed since Trump's first term and has originated video compilations of the phrase, pronounced in multiple circumstances. Old Man Trump by Woody Guthrie. This will be fun. It was about Fred Trump. Nice.
I ain't got no home, I'm just a rambling round, just a wandering worker. I roam from town to town. Police make it hard wherever I may go. And I ain't got no home in this world anymore. My brothers and my sisters are scattered on this road. It's a hot and dusty road that a million feet have trod. Landlord raised my rent
Generational battle, by the way.
from my door. But I ain't got no home in this world anymore.
Aliana, come here. Let me get your photo by the statue. Kodak moment. I'm willing to teach my children anarchist theory and teach them to fight the same enemies we do best. Believe the enemy does the same. Sure. They sure do. I'm gonna teach my kids the, I'll be posing, nice. I'm gonna teach my kids how to keep a house. That's what I'm gonna do first. Start with the basics. Start with structure.
As I look around, it's mighty plain to see this world is a wicked and a funny place to be. Gambling man is rich and the working man is poor. I ain't got no home in this world anymore. No, I ain't got no home in this world
There's a whole article for Donald Trump's conflict with the news media. Yeah, it's tough to have a relationship with the media when you view them as inherently damaging. List of conspiracy theories promoted by Donald Trump is its own article. Alright, that's enough of that.
Depicting former President Barack Obama and former First Lady Michelle Obama as apes. Congressmember Green was removed from the chamber. During the speech, President Trump repeatedly referred to immigrants as illegal aliens and commanded lawmakers to stand up if they agreed with his violent immigration crackdown. Democratic lawmakers refused. After Republican applause, Minnesota Congressmember Ilhan Omar shouted at President Trump, accusing him of killing U.S. citizens with his immigration policies.
Isn't that a shame? You should be ashamed of yourself not standing up. You should be ashamed of yourself. That is why I'm also asking you to end deadly sanctuary cities.
He's going to ask you to stand, and the next thing he's going to have you do is salute. You know what I mean? That one-handed salute.
That protect the criminals and enact serious penalties for public officials who block the removal of criminal aliens. In many cases, drug lords, murderers all over our country. They're blocking.
Jeez, Trump, don't eat the microphone.
The removal of these people out of our country, and you should be ashamed of yourself.
That was Congressmember Ilhan Omar shouting, "You're the murderer. You have killed Americans." After the speech, Virginia Governor Abigail Spanberger, a former CIA officer, gave the Democrats' response. She criticized President Trump for the cost of living and for his attacks on immigrants.
They have ripped nursing mothers away from their babies. They have sent children, a little boy in a blue bunny hat, children to far-off detention centers, and they have killed American citizens in our streets. And they have done it all with their faces masked from accountability.
Roughly half of all Democratic lawmakers skipped the State of the Union last night, as well as a majority of justices on the Supreme Court. Several Democratic lawmakers attended a People's State of the Union at the National Mall, including Senators Chris Murphy.
You think boycotting the State of the Union address is, like, going to do anything? Just yielding the entire hall to these fascists? Motherfucker, do your jobs. Ilhan Omar is in there yelling by herself. And where are you? Out in the fucking cold? What is this? Toothless.
And Holland and Ruben Gallego. This is Connecticut Senator Murphy.
Skipping. I don't give a fuck.
Alva, who represents Tucson, from Democratic Congress members Summer Lee and Adelita Grijalva, who represents Tucson, Arizona, on the border. Several Republican lawmakers are calling on GOP Congressmember Tony Gonzalez to resign amidst allegations he had an affair with a staffer who took her own life by setting herself on fire. Gonzalez is accused of sending sexually explicit text messages in which he asked his staffer, Regina Ann Santos Aviles, to, quote, send me a sexy pic. After she declined to provide him with a photo, Congressmember Gonzalez then asked about her, quote, favorite position. Congressmembers Thomas Massey of Kentucky, Lauren Boebert of Colorado.
Can I please live to see a day where I don't have to hear the fucking creepy-ass politicians who rule every aspect of our fucking lives, hear their creepy-ass text messages to people who just don't want them? I love how once again I did not get notified. Damn Twitch. Well, don't worry, we are just getting started.
Anna Paulina Luna of Florida and Nancy Mace of South Carolina and several other Republicans are demanding Gonzalez resign immediately over the allegations. He has refused to step down. The Pentagon's giving the artificial intelligence company Anthropic an ultimatum to allow full access to its models by Friday. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth reportedly told Anthropic's CEO Dario Amodei that the Pentagon is prepared to cancel its $200 million contract with the company and declare Anthropic a supply chain risk, and even invoke the Defense Production Act to force the company to tailor its AI model for the Pentagon.
I'm gonna close my door.
Anthropic has stated it's willing to adapt its policies for the Pentagon, but it won't allow its model to be used for mass surveillance to develop autonomous weapons. A Pentagon official told Axios, quote, the only reason we're still talking to these people is we need them, and we need them now. The problem for these guys is they are that good, unquote. Anthropic's AI in the U.S. military's operation to abduct former Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. Mexico's government has warned of potential legal action against Elon Musk after the tech billionaire falsely linked Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum to drug cartels. Sheinbaum spoke from Mexico City yesterday.
Well, we're considering whether to take some legal action. The lawyers are looking into it. But what matters to me is what the people say, honestly.
Musk's comments came in the aftermath of widespread violence in Mexico between cartels and Mexican forces in response to the killing of Mexico's most wanted drug lord, Nemesio Ruben Oseguera Cervantes, known as El Mencho.
Mic check.
Reuters reports Iran is close to a deal to buy anti-ship cruise missiles from China as the U.S. has deployed warships near the Iranian coast in a military buildup across the region not seen since the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003.
My God.
It comes as President Trump's weighing a military strike against Iran over its nuclear program.
You're not going to do that.
Negotiate.
You're not going to strike Iran. It's not happening. We just saw in the last broadcast that his primary general in charge of this naval blockade that they've got staging near Iran. They're like, our allies aren't backing us up, and we don't have the critical munitions because we've sent most, if not all of them, to Israel and Ukraine. So, and it's gonna put American lives in danger. And Iran is buying munitions from China. Bro, leave. And Trump is still weighing his options. What options? Leave. This is so fucked.
Leaders are set to hold indirect talks in Geneva tomorrow. Meanwhile, campus protests in Iran continued for a fourth straight day as demonstrators clashed with pro-government militias. It's the first major protest since the Iranian government cracked down on anti-government demonstrations last month, reportedly killing thousands of people. A whistleblower is claiming that FBI agents were delayed in arriving to major crime scenes, such as the far-right activist Charlie Kirk's assassination, because FBI Director Kash Patel frequently uses the agency's private jets. In a statement, Democratic Senator Dick
That video is crazy.
Durbin said, quote, since his confirmation as director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, FBI, Kash Patel is seemingly engaged in what amounts to irresponsible joyriding on DOJ and FBI-operated aircraft at the expense of the American taxpayer and to the detriment of ongoing Bureau operations, unquote.
Wasn't he also being questioned for having the FBI pick up his girlfriend or something? But also, this answers the question, why wasn't a crime scene set up right after the assassination of Charlie Kirk? If you notice, they don't set up a crime scene. Go back and look at all the photos and stuff. It's just people standing around, moving things and shit. It's crazy. The whole crime scene must have been contaminated.
Patel had used an FBI jet to travel to the Milan Olympics to attend the men's hockey final, where he was filmed chugging beer in the U.S. team's locker room.
Oh, my God.
The Trump administration suing the University of California, alleging UCLA ignored and failed to report complaints of anti-Semitism after pro-Palestinian demonstrations erupted on campus. It follows a previous lawsuit in August when the Trump administration demanded the University of California pay nearly $1.2 billion to set highly strategic region of Sudan rich in gold and oil. Meanwhile, on Monday, Chad closed its eastern border with Sudan following a series of clashes in the region. The BBC has apologized for failing to censor the N-word after a Tourette syndrome campaigner in the audience shouted the racial slur at Michael B. Jordan and Delroy Lindo as they presented the award for Best Visual Effects at the BAFTA Awards in London Sunday. The BAFTA Awards are the equivalent of the Oscars in Britain. The BBC failed to edit out the word from the broadcast, which aired 2 hours after the live show, while cutting the phrase Free Palestine from an acceptance speech by filmmaker Akinola Davies Jr. They also cut references to President Trump's crackdown in Minneapolis from the acceptance speech of BAFTA-winning filmmaker David Borenstein, co-director of the documentary Mr. Nobody Against Putin. He spoke to Democracy Now! Tuesday.
I also, in my speech, compared the importance of resistance in Russia to the importance of resistance in Minneapolis, and that was also taken out of the broadcast. So it seems that a lot of the political speeches were taken out of the broadcast.
The BBC reported another racial slur was edited from the broadcast and that the N-word had aired by mistake. In South Carolina, as the measles outbreak approaches 1,000
not good enough, man. Not good enough.
Reported cases, the state has enlisted the help of public health experts working outside the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has significantly altered the agency's vaccine recommendations and gutted vaccine research. Reuters reports a dozen public health experts are arriving in South Carolina to aid in the measles outbreak, which is the largest in the United States since 1992. 15 states led by Democrats are suing the Trump administration in an effort to reverse a policy by the CDC to reduce the number of vaccines it recommends for children. The lawsuit, announced Tuesday, also names HHS Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and challenges his unlawful replacement of officials, as they put it, from a key vaccine advisory committee. This follows another lawsuit filed in January by several public health groups, including the American Academy of Pediatrics. And in Brazil, at least 30 people have been reported dead as homes were swept away by massive landslides due to torrential rains in the southeastern state of Minas Gerais. A river burst its banks as record rainfall has battered the region, with firefighting crews still searching for about 40 people who remain missing. This is a survivor.
It was terrible. Words can't describe how sad it is. There's nothing to say. Just ask God to find those who survived and to perform a miracle.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for watching.
All right, that was the 25th. And the 26th.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. U.S. and Iranian negotiators have begun indirect negotiations in Geneva over Iran's nuclear program after President Trump ordered the largest deployment of U.S. forces to the Middle East since the U.S.-led invasion of Iraq in 2003. Ahead of the talks, the Trump administration imposed new sanctions on 30 people accused of enabling Iran's oil sales and weapons production. This comes as Trump's envoy, Steve Witkoff, is claiming Iran has enough fissile material to make a nuclear bomb within days, but several nuclear experts say Iran's nuclear program hasn't advanced since the U.S. and Israeli military struck them last June. This is Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi.
We were negotiating last June when Israel attacked us, and then the U.S. joined that attack. So that memory is still fresh for us. The wounds of that aggression is still alive in our minds. So we cannot forget that once we negotiating with the U.S. and then they decided to attack us.
Meanwhile, independent journalist Aida Chavez is reporting that Democratic lawmakers on the House Foreign Affairs Committee are trying to prevent a vote on an Iran war powers resolution sponsored by Congress members Ro Khanna and Thomas Massie. The bill would require every member of Congress to go on the record about a potential U.S. war with Iran. 4 Cuban exiles were killed Wednesday in a shootout between Cuban border guards and a U.S. speedboat carrying 10 Cuban exiles. According to the Cuban government, the men on the Florida-registered speedboat opened fire when Cuban forces approached the boat for an inspection off the northeast coast of Cuba. The Cuban guards then fired back, killing 4 of the men. 6 others were injured or now being held in Cuba in hospital. The Cuban government says the men were attempting to carry out, quote, an infiltration with terrorist ends, unquote. Cuban media reports the men were carrying weapons, Molotov cocktails, bulletproof jackets, and camouflage gear. On Wednesday, U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio said the U.S. will investigate what happened. Rubio was speaking at a gathering of Caribbean leaders who expressed alarm over the growing humanitarian crisis in Cuba due to the U.S. oil blockade that's cut off the island from desperately needed fuel. On Wednesday, 2 Mexican Navy ships departed from Veracruz with over 1,000 tons of humanitarian aid for Cuba. Russian officials say they're discussing the possibility of providing fuel to Cuba. And on Wednesday, Canada became the latest country to pledge food aid to Cuba. We'll have more on this story after headlines with Medea Benjamin, co-founder of Code Pink, who's helping to organize a humanitarian solidarity mission to Cuba next month. She's just back from the island.
That's so crazy. Canada literally has to go around the United States in order to get this aid to Cuba. That's so fucking crazy, man. The country that's like bordering the country to the north, our neighbors in the north are trying to make up for our crimes against the people south of us. That's so fucking crazy to me.
Dozens of international aid organizations have made a final appeal to the Israeli Supreme Court to prevent a de facto ban on their operations in Gaza and the occupied West Bank set to take effect in early March. The 37 international groups, including Oxfam and Doctors Without Borders, collectively provide more than half of all food assistance in Gaza, operate the majority of field hospitals, and run all inpatient treatment for children suffering severe acute malnutrition. This comes amidst a surge of violence by Israeli soldiers and settlers targeting Palestinians in the occupied West Bank. On Tuesday, settlers set fire to vehicles and tents in the Palestinian village of Susia. This is resident Ahmed Al-Nawajah.
We were shocked when around 30 settlers arrived. They were carrying incendiary materials and burned this tent and that one. They burned the chicken coop. They burned all the furniture. They left nothing.
The U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem says it'll offer passport and consular services to U.S. citizens in 2 Israeli settlements in the occupied West Bank. It's the first time the State Department's offered such services, a move the Palestinian Authority condemned as a, quote, clear violation of international law and a blatant favoring of the occupation authorities, unquote. A New York Times review finds key documents related to a woman who accused Donald Trump of assaulting her when she was a minor are missing from the Justice Department's release of the Epstein files. The missing documents are comprised of FBI memos summarizing interviews the agency conducted with the woman in 2019. She spoke to the FBI after Jeffrey Epstein was arrested and claimed she'd been sexually assaulted by both Donald Trump and Epstein in the 1980s when she was just 13 years old. The Times notes, according to the index of the Epstein files, the FBI conducted 4 interviews with the woman and provided summaries of each interview, but only one of the summaries, which details her accusation against Epstein, was released by the Justice Department. On Wednesday, former U.S. Treasury Secretary Larry Summers said he'll resign as a professor at Harvard University at the end of the semester over his ties to Epstein. Summers had previously served as president of Harvard. Summers had been on leave since last November after the Harvard Crimson student newspaper detailed how Summers had asked Epstein for relationship advice, how to have an affair with a person he was mentoring. Meanwhile, Bob Kerrey, the former Democratic senator from Nebraska, resigned from his role as chair of the company Monolith over his ties to Epstein. Nobel laureate Richard Axel also announced his resignation as co-director of Columbia University's Neuroscience Institute over his association with the convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein.
Down he
goes. The president and CEO of the World Economic Forum, Borja Brenda, said he was resigning after the forum launched an independent investigation into his relationship with Epstein. Meanwhile, Bill Gates has apologized to his staff of the charitable foundation over his ties to Epstein. Gates also acknowledged he had 2 affairs with Russian women that Epstein later discovered. According to a recording obtained by the Wall Street Journal, Gates admitted he first met with Epstein in 2011, years after Epstein had pleaded guilty in 2008 to soliciting a minor for prostitution. A federal judge has ruled the Trump administration's policy of deporting immigrants to third countries to which they have no ties is unlawful. In his ruling, U.S. District Judge Brian Murphy said that immigrants challenging the Department of Homeland Security's policy have the right to meaningful notice and can object before they're deported to a third country. In Buffalo, New York, a disabled Rohingya refugee from Burma has been found dead after he was abandoned by Border Patrol agents about 5 miles from his home. 56-year-old Nurul Amin Shah Alam was mostly blind and spoke no English. His family told reporters no one at the Department of Homeland Security warned them or his lawyers that he'd been released from jail and dropped off alone outside a coffee shop on a cold winter night. Minnesota Congressmember Ilhan Omar is demanding an investigation into the arrest of her guest at the State of the Union Tuesday night. Alia Rahman was removed from the House chamber and jailed, all for standing silently.
What do you mean going down, down, down? Down, down in an earlier round, and maybe we're going down swinging. A loaded god complex, cocky and pull it. Explain yourself. The representative from New York has the floor. All them people down tied to Epstein. Yeah, they're all going down. One by one by one, like dominoes. It'll get to Trump. Oh, it'll get to Trump. One day. And we'll get to live to see it. You and I, no matter what happens, will outlive Trump. Hey! That's a good feeling.
During President Alia Rahman, Omar is demanding an investigation into the arrest of her guest at the State of the Union Tuesday night. Alia Rahman was removed from the House chamber and jailed, all for standing silently during President Trump's speech. She described her arrest on Democracy Now!
I was not just removed and arrested. I was arrested so physically that 2 other attendees upstairs attempted to intervene in officers pulling on my shoulders after I told them I have a torn rotator cuff tendon.
Trump should have been
and
first.
Multiple cartilage tears in both of my shoulders.
In a statement, Minneapolis Congressmember Ilhan Omar wrote, quote, "The heavy-handed response to a peaceful guest sends a chilling message about the state of our democracy," unquote. Alia Rahman is a U.S. citizen. She was injured last month when federal immigration agents smashed her car window in Minneapolis and dragged her out of her car. She's autistic, reportedly telling them she was disabled repeatedly. She was detained at the Whipple Federal Building and later released without charge. The Trump administration announced Wednesday it's freezing more than $250 million in Medicaid reimbursements to the state of Minnesota. In announcing the move, Vice President J.D. Vance cited a fraud scandal that's been linked to a handful of Somali Americans in Minneapolis. Nearly 1.3 million people in Minnesota receive some form of Medicaid coverage, or about a quarter of all state residents. In a statement, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz condemned the Trump administration's actions, writing, quote, "The agents Trump allegedly sent to investigate fraud are shooting protesters and arresting children. His DOJ is gutting the U.S. Attorney's Office and crippling their ability to prosecute fraud. And every week, Trump pardons another fraudster," unquote. President Trump's nominee to become the next U.S. Surgeon General appeared before the Senate Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee on Wednesday, where she declined to encourage parents to have their kids vaccinated against measles and influenza. Casey Means is a wellness influencer, author, and entrepreneur. She and her brother, Callie Means, are key figures in the
we have a measles
Make America
outbreak.
Healthy Again movement, advisors to Health Secretary RFK Jr. during his 2024 presidential campaign. Casey Means has a medical degree from Stanford University, but did not complete her surgical residency and allowed her medical license to expire in 2024. Under questioning from Senator Tim Kaine, Means repeatedly refused to state whether she agreed with Health Secretary RFK Jr. that there's no evidence flu vaccines prevent serious disease.
A mountain of evidence about this. Do you believe that there's no evidence that the flu vaccine has efficacy in reducing serious injury or hospitalization? This is an easy one, doctor. This is an easy one.
Whoa.
I support the CDC's guidance on the flu vaccine, and I will always be working with the CDC, ACIP, and the agency.
So you believe it is an efficacious vaccine to reduce hospitalization? And
is or is not?
Is. You believe it is?
As I said, I support the CDC's guidance on the flu vaccine.
Let me just say.
The artificial intelligence company Anthropic is dropping its core safety pledge in scaling its AI models. The company's reversal comes after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth issued an ultimatum to Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei to grant the Pentagon full access to the company's AI models by Friday. Hegseth reportedly threatened to cancel a $200 million Pentagon contract and to declare Anthropic a supply chain risk, and even said he might invoke the Defense Production Act to force the company to tailor its AI models for military use. Amodei had previously warned against the use of artificial intelligence to help the U.S. government conduct mass surveillance and develop autonomous weapons. This comes as NBC News reports that in December, Anthropic agreed to allow the U.S. government to use its AI systems for missile and cyber defense purposes. And Brazil's Supreme Court has sentenced 5 men to prison terms after convicting them of plotting the 2018 assassination of Rio de Janeiro City Councilwoman Marielle Franco and her driver, Anderson Gomes. Among those found guilty were former Congress member Chiquinho Brasio and his brother Domingos. Marielle Franco is a black lesbian known for her fierce criticism of police killings in Brazil's impoverished favela neighborhoods. On Wednesday, her widow, Monica Benicio, celebrated the Brazilian Supreme Court's unanimous ruling.
Marielle becomes a symbol, but because society has made her so, because it believes that this country can be much better than it is now. Justice for Marielle is not a slogan, it's a life task. It's the fight for building a society where people like Marielle and Anderson can live, flourish, and never be murdered for being who they are. And that's the message we leave here today, written in the history of Brazilian democracy.
And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Mimi Goodman.
And I'm Narmeen Sheikh. Welcome to our list.
So let's talk about what looks to be Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez planning to run for president, which I'm pretty sure has the support of many people who claim to be on the left, even though it obviously shouldn't. So she went to this event sponsored by a bunch of fucking arms companies in Germany, where she gave a speech on foreign policy and such, which was the generic liberal imperialist drivel, which isn't really the sort of thing that someone who wants to stay as a congresswoman would be doing. It's, I think it's her sort of putting herself forward as a potential big shot for the next election, or maybe if there is even an election, that is, who knows, or maybe the election after that, to run for president. And I think it's criminal that people can listen to the sort of thing that she says here and not see it as the exact same.
One of the comments said AOCIA. That's crazy. That goes hard, actually.
But first, let's take a look at the news. Here's a brief summary of some of the latest developments this week in Palestine.
Israel continues to kill and injure Palestinians across the Gaza Strip 4.5 months into the fraudulent ceasefire, while adequate and dignified shelter materials, food supplies, and medications continue to be blockaded by Israel and its Western partners. Heavy rains once again hit Gaza this week, flooding thousands of tents and leaving families without proper protection from the elements. 2 Palestinians were killed on Wednesday evening in eastern Deir Balah in central Gaza in an Israeli attack that targeted civilians, according to medical sources at the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital. On Tuesday, a Palestinian was killed in an Israeli drone attack in Gaza City, according to the Wafa news agency. The Palestinian Ministry of Health in Gaza says that as of February 25th, 618 Palestinians have been killed and more than 1,600 injured since the so-called ceasefire agreement went into effect last October. Writing in Middle East Eye this week, journalist and researcher Maha Husseini reports that, quote, despite the relative lull in large-scale bombardment, attacks have not fully ceased. On the first 2 days of Ramadan, the Israeli military killed 2 Palestinians and injured 4 others across the Gaza Strip. Husseini adds that since 2023, Palestinians in Gaza have observed Ramadan under Israeli-imposed starvation, quote, during which Israeli forces killed hundreds of Palestinians waiting for aid in Gaza City in what was dubbed the Flower Massacres. This Ramadan, she says, Gaza's markets resemble the pre-war period, with shelves once again stocked with goods. Quote, yet for many in Gaza, those items remain largely out of reach, unaffordable amid the near total devastation of the impoverished Strip's economic sector. Many families are forced to spend their days filling water and collecting firewood to heat their tent shelters and prepare food. By the end of January, only about 20% of the allotted 1,500 trucks of cooking gas have entered Gaza, Husseini notes, so families are dependent on dwindling amounts of firewood to cook during Ramadan. Excuse me. This photo by Khamis Al-Refi shows a family holding their first iftar of Ramadan on the rubble of the Al-Abbas Mosque on February 18th. The mosque was bombed by Israel during the genocide. Israel is continuing to deny medical evacuations to children and adult patients alike after nearly 2.5 years of genocide and the destruction of the health system across Gaza. And while Israel continues to block necessary medications, medical equipment, and supplies to repair vital health infrastructure from entry. On February 22nd, 2-year-old Nidal Abu Rabi died after waiting for treatment for a disease that affected his liver and spleen. Reporter Asama Kahlout recorded Nidal's mother, Iman Hamdoun, in shock and grief, holding her son's little body that was wrapped in blankets. She says that the evacuation referral for Nidal had been in place for 3 months, but Israel kept denying him permission to leave Gaza for medical treatment. Quote, my voice is gone from the amount of appeals I made, she says. No one cares about me or about the child. Today I lost my son. I don't want to lose my daughter too. Iman says that her daughter is receiving treatment at Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital for kidney disease and has low protein and albumin levels, and that every time she is admitted, her situation is difficult and she's put on oxygen. The World Health Organization said last month that more than 18,500 people in the Gaza Strip, including at least 4,000 children, still require evacuation for medical treatment unavailable in the territory. The Gaza Ministry of Health said on February 2nd that more than 1,200 patients have already died while waiting to leave for urgent medical treatment. New evidence has been released this week in a 73-page report by the independent investigative research organizations Forensic Architecture and Earshot into the massacre of 15 Palestinian rescue workers in Tal al-Sultan in southern Gaza nearly a year ago on March 23, 2025. In the attack, as you may remember, Israel killed 8 aid and rescue workers with the Palestine Red Crescent Society, 6 from the Palestinian Civil Defense, and a staff member of UNRWA, the UN Agency for Palestine Refugees. The Israeli military was forced to change its story about the ambush several times following the discovery of the bodies in a mass grave, along with their flattened vehicles, and the emergence of video and audio recordings taken by the rescue workers, reports Dropsite News. An internal military inquiry ultimately did not recommend any criminal action against the army units responsible for the attack. Earshot and Forensic Architecture's investigation, their report says, quote, offers detailed evidence regarding the circumstances of the incident in Tal al-Sultan, including extrajudicial executions, a survivor being forced to work at an Israeli military checkpoint, and efforts to conceal, disturb, and erase evidence relating to the attack. Some of the findings included in the report reveal that Israeli soldiers, quote, ambushed and subjected Palestinian aid workers to a near continuous assault for over 2 hours, even though the soldiers never came under fire, and that, quote, at least 910 gunshots were documented across 3 video and audio recordings of the attack. The vast majority of these gunshots, at least 844, were fired over just 5 minutes and 30 seconds. At least 93% of the gunshots recorded in the first minutes of the attack were fired directly towards the emergency vehicles and aid workers by Israeli soldiers, the report adds. And during this time, at least 5 shooters fired simultaneously. Witness testimonies suggest as many as 30 soldiers were present in the area. Furthermore, Israeli soldiers, quote, first maintained fixed firing positions from the elevated sandbank, then walked toward the aid workers while continuing to shoot. Upon reaching the aid workers, the soldiers moved between them and the vehicles and executed some of the aid workers at point-blank range, as close as 1 meter away, Dropsite notes. In the 37 days following the attack, one of the two survivors was detained without charge, tortured, and interrogated in relation to the incident at the Sde Tayman detention camp. And in the days and weeks that followed, the area surrounding the site of the massacre was further transformed by the Israeli military's construction of the so-called Morag corridor and the building of an aid distribution site operated by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the report explains. Speaking to Drop Site, former UN official in Palestine Jonathan Whittall, who was one of the team members on the ground when the mass grave was discovered 5 days after the attack and who provided evidence to forensic architecture and earshot for their investigation, said, quote, "Following our discovery of the mass grave, the narrative from Israeli forces shifted multiple times. We were fed several versions of a blatant lie. The men we retrieved last year were medics. We found them in their uniforms, ready to save lives, only to be killed by Israeli forces, fully aware of their protected status." This illustrates an abhorrent disregard for international law, he continued, where any Palestinian in an Israeli-designated evacuation zone is targeted regardless of their civilian status. It highlights the total lack of accountability under which these forces operate. International governments continue to arm and trade with a leadership accused of genocide, whose soldiers massacred medics and buried them in a grave marked by the siren light of the ambulance they destroyed, Whittall said. On Tuesday, the British Palestine Committee hosted a launch event for the new report in the UK Parliament. In addition to providing the findings of the report, researchers included evidence that a British reconnaissance plane flew over the site of the massacre only 2 days following the killings. The committee and the research groups are demanding that the UK government, quote, "reveal any footage taken during that flight, as it may contain evidence crucial for bringing the perpetrators of the massacre to justice for their crimes under international criminal law." Speakers warned that failure to do so may amount to obstruction of justice. Turning to the occupied West Bank, Israeli soldiers and settlers shot and killed 2 Palestinian teenagers this week. In the early morning hours of Sunday, February 22nd, Israeli forces killed a 17-year-old Palestinian boy in the northern town of Beit Furik. According to Defense for Children International Palestine, Mohammed Wahbi Abdulaziz Hanani had just finished evening prayers in the Zalmut Mosque on Saturday evening when Israeli forces in heavily armored military vehicles arrived in the area. Mohammed and other young Palestinians allegedly threw stones toward the military vehicles for about 2 minutes before Israeli forces opened fire, striking Mohammed in the head from a distance of about 40 meters. The children's rights group reported that, quote, "soldiers rushed toward Mohammed, who had collapsed on the ground, and searched the area before an Israeli military ambulance arrived, and its military paramedics began to administer first aid. A few minutes later, a Palestinian ambulance arrived at the scene, and Israeli soldiers obstructed the paramedics' access to Mohammed. After several minutes of discussion, the Israeli soldiers allowed the Palestinian paramedics to provide first aid under their supervision. The Palestinian ambulance transported Mohammed to the Rafidia Governmental Hospital in Nablus. On the way, it encountered a closed military checkpoint, delaying the trip by several minutes. Mohammed's heart stopped in the ambulance, and paramedics conducted cardiopulmonary resuscitation until they reached the hospital, where doctors in the operating room cleaned the wound and tried to stop the bleeding, but he was pronounced dead just after midnight. Mohammed is the 4th Palestinian child killed by Israeli forces in the occupied West Bank in 2026, according to documentation collected by DCIP. Israeli forces and settlers killed 56 Palestinian children in the occupied West Bank in 2025. On February 20th,
Murdered
Israeli
for
settlers
throwing
shot and killed 19-year-old
stones.
Nasrallah.
Murdered for throwing stones. That is a headline. That is a headline that could have been written 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And I said this during the Democracy Now! Headlines. Hey, buddy. Does the puppy want uppies? Okay, let me get this blanket. I said this during the Democracy Now! Headlines. We don't investigate lynchings of our own people on our own soil. What makes you think we're going to investigate the lynchings of Palestinian Americans in the West Bank? It's not happening. Palestinian American, Nasrallah Abu Siyam. Okay. Oh, there he is.
Abu Siyam in the village of Mukhmas. The armed settlers invaded the village and attacked a farmer. Abu Siyam and other residents intervened to defend the farmer, and Israeli forces then arrived and shot tear gas, sound grenades, and live ammunition. A resident of the village, speaking to the Associated Press, said that, quote, "when the settlers saw the army, they were encouraged and started shooting live bullets." He added that the settlers clubbed those already injured with sticks after they had fallen to the ground. Abu Siyam was a U.S. citizen born in Philadelphia. His family has demanded accountability for his killing, while the U.S. State Department told reporters that it was, quote, carefully monitoring the situation. Elsewhere in the West Bank, Israeli settlers torched and desecrated a mosque in the village of Tel, southwest of Nablus, on February 23rd. Settlers sprayed racist graffiti on the walls of the Abu Bakr as-Siddiq Mosque, including slogans such as price tag and revenge. Other settler attacks were reported in Susia, Nasafriyata, Jerusalem, and in Jalud near Nablus. We've published many features in the last week, but we wanted to highlight Noor's short life of unimaginable suffering by Sumaya Nassar, a teacher writing from Gaza. When the genocide on Gaza began, my daughter Noor was not yet 3 months in my womb, Nassar writes. Quote, I carried her inside me while living the bitterness of displacement and the cruelty of war. She was born in April 2024 under the harshest of conditions amid a suffocating siege. She became the hope that kept me alive. I named her Noor, which means light, so she could guide me through the darkness surrounding Gaza. In mid-September, my family and I fled to a house in Deir Balah. I hoped we would finally be safe in an area the Israeli occupation had declared a, quote, safe zone. On the morning of September 23rd, 2025, I woke early, dressed my daughter, gently combed her soft hair, and prepared her to meet her grandparents, who had arrived from Gaza City at midnight. Then a violent explosion shook the entire place. I didn't look for anything except Noor. I screamed her name again and again. Then I suddenly heard her father yelling, help, Noor, quick. We found her lying on the ground. She had fallen from the 3rd floor all the way down to the lower level when the upper floor was bombed. Still, unmoving, no trace of blood. I screamed. My husband and I were terrified to even touch her. Our hands froze above her tiny body. Her uncle, Mohammed, 22, gently placed his hand over her heart and felt a faint heartbeat. He looked at us calmly and said, she's still alive. My husband ran outside without realizing he had no shoes on, searching desperately for any means of transport. He saw our neighbor getting into his car, heading to the market, and begged him to take them to the hospital. My husband tried to pick up Noor, but he couldn't. His hands were trembling uncontrollably, and fear had numbed his entire body. So Mohammed carried her gently and placed her in the car. I went with them to the hospital. When the doctor saw her, he looked at me with a silence that spoke plenty, as if he were saying, there's nothing we can do. You may lose her. She was rushed into the intensive care unit. She was the only child in the unit at Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital in Deir Balah. She lay on the bed showing no signs of life. Her small body was covered in tubes and surrounded by machines. Long visits were forbidden. I was only allowed 10 minutes a day. I would place my hand on her tiny body and find it as cold as ice. My heart shattered again and again. She had internal bleeding, doctors said. Her skull was fractured from the fall. Every minute I prayed that her bleeding would stop, that she would survive. After 12 long days in the ICU, my beloved girl finally emerged from the critical stage and was moved to the pediatric ward. She survived, but at what cost? The head injury, and what doctors said was bleeding in her brain, caused Noor to lose her sight and her ability to move. After a long period in the hospital where doctors were unable to offer the treatment my daughter needed, I had no choice but to return with her to a tent in a displacement camp in Deir Balah, where we had found shelter. I stand helpless before her suffering. I cannot restore her vision. I cannot help her walk or play with other children. She cries constantly, out of pain, boredom, and confusion. Every few seconds, she calls out, Mama, just to make sure I'm beside her. She clings to me, believing that I can protect her, even from Israeli airstrikes. Those are excerpts from Noor's short life of unimaginable suffering by Sumaya Nassar, a teacher writing from Gaza on electronicintifada.net. And now, as we always do, we wanted to highlight people expressing joy, determination, and reclamation across Palestine and around the world. In Gaza, photographer Khamis Al-Rafi captured images of Palestinians performing the first Tarawih prayer of Ramadan on the ruins of the great Omari Mosque in Gaza City, built in the 7th century and largely destroyed in Israeli attacks during the first few months of the genocide. And this past week, young singer Mohammed Al-Shabrawi walked down the streets with his friends, singing a song about the pride and dignity of Gaza. The lyrics are, quote, for your sake, your people stand noble. Oh, our steadfast Gaza, there's no way that Israel can take Gaza. The people of Gaza declared it. For your sake, the siege will be lifted. With you, we die with our heads held high. We will come out from beneath the wall. The people of Gaza declared it. And that's it for the news roundup. As always, go to electronicintifada.net for much more, especially to read our new features by our brave writers in Gaza. You're watching the Electronic Intifada live stream. I'm Nora Barrows-Friedman with my colleague Ali Abunimah. Hi, Ali.
Hi, Nora. It's good to see you. It's good to be back. It feels like a long time when we are away from the show for a week. So
Yeah.
I'm glad to see you and see everyone back. And thank you for that update. So much is happening.
I know.
And
Yeah.
that picture of the Omari Mosque of people gathering there warmed my heart in a way. I remember visiting it in 2013 when it had just been restored, and it's this beautiful ancient
Yeah.
building. And seeing it absolutely devastated during this genocide, on top of all the human loss and suffering, was really heartbreaking. So seeing people there and seeing the pictures of people already gathering the stones to restore it and rebuild it, it just shows, people that they're not going away. They're not giving up their land and their history. They're rooted in it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that building, I was reading a little bit from some of our previous reporting about the Great Omari Mosque, and it was, it was built as a mosque in the 7th century, but it had these previous iterations of buildings, temples, sacred sites that had been stewarded by the people of that land.
Yeah, the Palestinian mindset is like, okay, you're destroying us, and you're destroying our history, then so it shall be. Let destruction be part of our history, and then let the rebuilding of it also be part of our history.
For millennia. And in a second, on, I think it was December 8th, 2023, Israeli warplanes destroyed most of it. And it's just, it's a testament to the depravity of Israel and the steadfastness of the Palestinians in Gaza.
Yeah, we can, maybe later in the show, we'll have time to mention historian Ilan Pape's piece that we published this week because it relates to this. But they're using bombs to write the fake Zionist narrative that Palestine was always and only a Jewish land, and to erase the many other cultures, influences, religions that have always been part of Palestine and still part of its heritage. So but maybe we'll have time to talk about that later.
Yeah, we should, absolutely. Well, we have a packed show today. We're going to hear from John after our interview with Mohammed Shahadeh, but we did just recently sit down with Mohammed and talk about all of these just deplorable plans of U.S. and Israeli officials in terms of Gaza. So let's go.
Yeah, this is fresh. We recorded it. Was it this morning for you or last night for you? With the time difference, I'm in Jordan, you're in California, so we're on different planets practically. But just to accommodate Mohammed's schedule. But it's a very rich discussion. I mean, he is so full of facts. I mean, it's just incredible. You're going to get so much out of this. We didn't want to stop. But we have.
Let's get to John Elmer's resistance report.
All right, so you are watching and listening to the Electronic Intifada. I am John Elmer. This is the Resistance Report for day 874 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Today, we are going to look at the U.S. military buildup in the area that it calls Central Command, aimed at...
They don't even count the days of the fraud ceasefire anymore. They just keep counting the days of the genocide. Like, you have to laugh. Like, just, you know what? No more talk of a ceasefire. What ceasefire? The occupiers? Fake ceasefire? Anyway, here's the current day of the genocide. Well said, John Elmer.
Iran. It's gunboat diplomacy, old school gunboat, the 874 of Israel's genocide in Gaza. Today, we are going to look at the U.S. military buildup in the area that it calls Central Command, aimed at Iran. It's gunboat diplomacy, old school gunboat diplomacy aimed at Iran. I'm reporting this on Thursday, the 26th of February. Of course, things are moving very quickly, but let's start with the maps to give you,
What kind of diplomacy would you call the strikes against the boats in the Gulf? Or off the coast of Venezuela?
This is what the old story of any country that the
drone diplomacy?
Americans attack. The country happens to be surrounded by...
Instead of gunboat diplomacy, gunship diplomacy?
U.S. military bases, which you can see on this map running all through the area, dozens of bases, part of the 800 U.S. permanent bases all around the world. They also have shared airfields that don't count as permanent bases that are being used for this preparation, but you can see the air bases are the darker green, and the more fixed bases are and naval bases are the lighter green on here, and you can see that they have shown the USS Abraham Lincoln. The aircraft carrier is off the coast of Amman, and as of today, the USS Ford is pushing towards the Eastern Mediterranean. It just left dock in Greece. So today, also in Geneva, was the third round of talks, and these talks are, again, they're led by Kushner and Witkoff. They're not, they don't have a bunch of experts in tow, and the Iranians are experts on this file. They've been negotiating on this file for decades, and they send serious negotiators to meet with Kushner and Witkoff, who are real estate guys who don't have any background history on this issue. They're not surrounded by people who do, and so we saw today in Geneva them Kushner and Witkoff leave the negotiations to go and do their Ukraine negotiations. And that's the same thing as the Board of Peace. When they're at the Board of Peace, Kushner and Witkoff, they came out and did interviews about the attack on Iran. So they've got these balls in the air, juggling them, and have no expertise to do this. So that's the first map. Let's take a look at the second map, which will show you how these the military buildup is taken place, largely from continental United States over the Atlantic Ocean into bases in Europe, in Western Europe, in the UK, in Germany,
That's
Spain,
crazy.
Italy, and then further over to Greece and Cyprus. There you can see, and then numerous major bases in the.
These are all United States military bases hosting aircraft. In all these other countries. That's fucking crazy.
Middle East, closer to Iran that we saw on the previous map. There's more than 40,000 U.S. troops permanently stationed in the CENTCOM area, and the entire area of the U.S. Central Command is under missile range of the Iranian. Of the IRGC
It just
program.
looks
so
like
something just important to put on the table.
It just looks like an array of. It just looks like a wall of munitions aimed at Iran, in Libya, and Egypt. It's fucking crazy, dude.
Because we're going to focus mostly on the American buildup here, the main focus of the nuclear talks is that the U.S. has a maximalist position, a position that even if they took the most minimum of the U.S. position, it's greater than the maximum position that Iran is willing to accept. So essentially, the U.S. is looking for surrender from the Iranians, surrender of sovereignty, surrender of their military capacity, surrender of their foreign policy. And so these talks don't seem to have the road to avoid war built into them. So we'll have to follow them closely. And of course, Trump is just so erratic that there's nothing like even saying that there's negotiations happening right now in a normal circumstance would mean that the war will not start. But we know from the last round of negotiations, that Israel struck.
It is a fucking terrible game of Battleship. There's like no diplomatic path out of this situation. And they're building up gunships in the Mediterranean.
Iran before the major meeting that was set with the Americans. We know the Israelis struck Qatar when, as soon as the Hamas delegation in Qatar was given the ceasefire proposal, there was an assassination attempt on them during those times. So these negotiations, I don't think it's worth tons of our time delving into the negotiations because Trump doesn't follow that kind of playbook.
It kind of also separates Iran from the rest of the Middle East. Like, Saudi Arabia is such a traitor to its neighbors. You know what I mean? Saudi Arabia. A wealthy country full of fucking traitors.
It's not linear for him. He can just
abandon Palestine. They're right there. Egypt, so did you. The United Arab Emirates needs to be dismantled. It's a fucking blight on the Middle East.
Side at any given moment, and he seems to have enough people in the U.S. military going along with this, although we know that there's dissenting voices as well, because the possibility of this kind of a war spiraling out of control is real. And what we've seen from the Iranians, there's been 3 operations by the Iranians responding to attacks on them. True Promise 1 was in April 2024. True Promise number 2 was October 2024. And those were seen as demonstrations. They were an attempt to show the capacity that the Iranians have to strike without sparking a war. True Promise 3 was the 12-day war. And in that time, in those 12 days, Iran struck Israel in downtown Tel Aviv. It struck military bases all over the country. And again, they call that demonstrative. And this week, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, he basically called the Americans bluff when he addressed what Trump called his big, beautiful armada. Khamenei said, the Americans constantly say that they've sent a warship toward Iran. Of course, a warship is a dangerous piece of military hardware. However, more dangerous than that warship is the weapon that can send that warship to the bottom of the sea. Iran wrote to the United Nations that if U.S. aggression happens, all bases.
It's like a game of Battleship, but it's also like Risk. It's like playing a game of Risk, but Trump only has the balls to attack like civilian like fishing vessels. Like, what a bitch. You have all the power. and you're murdering civilian fishermen? I'll say it again. You are a bitch.
Facilities and assets of the aggressor in the region will be considered legitimate targets under self-defense of Article 51 of the UN Charter. And for their part, the Iranians are also carrying out military exercises in the islands around the Strait of Hormuz, through which about 20% of the world's oil and natural gas flow. So many options on the table for the Iranians to respond. And we're going to see that build up happen here. If we look at number 3 here, this is flight tracker data. And you're going to see at the bottom the time scale. So we're watching this go day by day over the course of the last week. And you can see this graphic that we're looking on the screen shows U.S. military deckled planes flying all over flying across the world, really, the way that we're looking at it. And the way that
But look how the planes kind of draw a line where those military bases are. It's so much activity just like orbiting traversing the line of offense.
Is that the transponders go off when they're in the middle of the ocean. So it looks a little bit broken up here, but you can imagine that each of those flights are continuing across the Atlantic. They just go dark for long periods of time. It's also tanker traffic for the most part that's being watched, and strategic lift. The fighter jets fly dark, but when there's tankers flying, you know that they're flying with a squadron of fighter jets as well. So this is just a really remarkable way that Flight Radar 24 showed us that this week. We can look at the next one. It shows just a single day. And this is the movement of more than 150 fighter aircraft. We're now over 200. These numbers are going up every day because it's been a 6-week buildup. The buildup has intensified over the last week or 10 days, and the numbers have increased pretty drastically. And you can see just the amount of activity. Again, the Atlantic Ocean, these flights are continuing over the Atlantic Ocean, which would make for a better visual, but they're limited by the transponder access over the ocean and the fact that these planes fly in ghost mode. We can look at the next map. It will show us a 3D version of what these maps look like. Number 5 here. You can see again just the lines, and we talk in metaphors a lot, like an air bridge. We talked about that throughout the war in Gaza, where there was an air bridge to Israel from the United States to support the genocide in Gaza. But when you look at the way that this is graphed, you can see those purple and pink lines flying across the ocean, setting up, going into Europe, where they refuel, and then they go from those bases down into the bases in the Middle East, which you can see perfectly there across the screen as a literal air bridge. And that is how these military assets are being put into.
Bro. It goes straight to the UK, then bounces over into Europe for a bit, and then straight to Israel. This is a dark map. Not like, I mean literally, and and the data it's showing. Like, this genocide has been going on for so long, we can measure the genocide in air traffic. And if you can't measure it, you can damn near almost see it, you know? That's what this graph is showing. Holy fuck.
Place the largest military buildup that we have seen since before the war in Iraq in 2003. So we've also never seen this level of buildup before without there being a war. We've also never had Trump before, so that might not hold. But in any other time, if you see this much military buildup, you can expect a war to follow. If we look on the next screen, we can see what happens here when these planes land. This is Muwafaq al-Salti base in Jordan. This has become a key strategic hub for the war. It's also in central Jordan, right, basically acts as a shield for Israel. Muwafaq al-Salti was a Jordanian pilot who was killed in battle against the Israelis in 1966. So to see this airfield being used today by the Americans and the Israelis to prepare for this war has a bit of history to it. We're looking here on the from satellite images. These came from Reuters and the New York Times, showing 66 plus warplanes, 3 times the number that are normally stationed at this base. And over the last over a 5-day period last week, there was 68 heavy lift, like the largest cargo planes on Earth, taking supplies into this base. And so we've seen that. This is a satellite image. We can see the next one. You can see it up closer. The next couple. And you can see the F-35s there on the base in Jordan. This base has now been overflowing with assets, and so the Americans are moving to other.
Lockheed Martin, Rolls-Royce, companies like these build the parts for these F-35s. And the UK helps facilitate the construction, or outright sending whole aircraft to Israel. And here they are on the runway.
Bases in Jordan, multiple other bases in Jordan. There again, you see the F-35s, and these are only the ones that are out on the runway.
Those are the clearest photos I've ever seen of, like, military assets taken from satellite view. Holy shit. And the door is open again because Winston left. He doesn't like when Dad curses at the computer.
There's also hardened shelters in these air bases that would conceal other planes.
I'm not even like being that loud. It's just that he can just feel the energy. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, Dad doesn't like what he's watching on the screen. I'm gonna go.
It's presumably Jordanian planes, but there's many hardened covers that would cover up more planes. So we don't have the full picture of the like the Americans don't admit to these numbers. These are open source satellite imagery and flight tracking data that is putting all of this together. And one more you can see here, number 8. Yeah, these are the MQ-9 Reaper drones. These are the drones that the Yemenis dropped out of the sky by the dozens in their battle in the Red Sea. They're also positioned in Jordan here at that same airbase. And if we look at the next slide, this is an interesting one. This is Ben Gurion Airport hosting here American Air Force refueling tanker planes. There was also C-17s parked at Ben Gurion. So the Israelis using a civilian airport for military purposes, which is of course something that they always do, but are the first to accuse others of doing. We know that Israel is deeply involved in this attack plan. There was a report yesterday from the State Department leaks saying that they want the Israelis to attack first. That's what happened in the 12-day war.
We have a huge Lockheed Martin here. Wow. Those are the exact types of facilities that get heckled, that get protested. But like a Lockheed Martin facility is the exact type of facility that gets broken into and vandalized. Like we've seen with other companies that are complicit in the genocide in Gaza.
That might make sense for the Israelis to carry out this the early stages of this battle. In any case, the point is, it is a United States and Israeli operation through and through. We saw over the last couple of days US F-22s fly from the UK to Ovet.
I'm gonna have to edit that out for YouTube.
Ovda Air Base in the Negev, which is being set up as a US hub inside Israel. The F-22 stealth fighter jets were reported. They were actually reported through CENTCOM in Israeli media. They made it around the censor. They say on Khan, the state broadcaster, a source in the US Central Command, confirmed to us this evening that 12 F-22 fighter jets landed this afternoon at one of the air bases in the south of the country as part of the U.S. regional deployment in the Middle East. These are the most advanced fighter jets in the world, which only the Americans have, and among other things, are supposed to penetrate enemy territory and open up air defense systems and neutralize radars. It is possible that the American choice to deploy F-22 squadron in Israel stems from the fact that Israel is prepared to deal with the missile attacks based on past experience in the last campaign. And also for Netanyahu's part, he's never seen a war that he doesn't want the U.S. to fight on Israel's behalf. A week ago Sunday, he spoke on his terms for the war. Netanyahu is eager for the United States. This is from the Washington Post. Netanyahu is eager for the United States to launch a major attack on Iran. In a speech on Sunday, he put forward his own conditions for any U.S. agreement with Tehran. Any deal must ban all enrichment of uranium and dismantle the equipment and infrastructure that allows you to enrich it in the first place.
Netanyahu, the
annual
acting
conference
president of the United
presidents
States.
of major American Jewish organizations. It should also require that all enriched uranium leave Iran and restrict its ballistic missile program and impose sustained inspections on the civilian nuclear program. This has obviously been a dream of Netanyahu's for the last 25 years, and as I said, he's never met a war in the Middle East that he does.
Yeah. Netanyahu could just lead Trump by the fucking tongue on his foreign policy.
Does not want the United States to fight for Israel. But just as a note of reminder from the 12-day war, that war rocked Israel, and the United States used a significant portion of its air defense systems, particularly the terminal high altitude aerial defense interceptors. They used 1/4 of their entire inventory in that 12-day war. The Israelis, in the first days after the war, the tax authority talked about multiple billions of dollars in damage that happened in that 12-day period, sustained damage that the highest ever recorded in Israeli history in a period of time like that. The tax authority director said that these challenges are a magnitude we've never faced in the history of Israel. So that was only for the 12-day war. And Wall Street Journal reports upwards in some days of $200 million in air defense assets used during that battle. So a prolonged war between Iran and Israel and the United States puts all of the United States assets in the region in range. And it puts Israel in the place that we saw it last summer during that 12-day war, where they didn't want that war to continue.
I think they are
all.
too.
And Israeli newspapers are talking about hysteria within Israel, traumatized people from that war. We take a look at the next slide because those were aerial assets brought over, but of course we also have the naval assets, and this is the USS Abraham Lincoln. It is off the coast of Oman in the Arabian Sea. It's about 700 kilometers off the coast to get it out of range of anti-ship ballistic missiles and anti-ship cruise missiles. We saw that with the Yemen war as well. So these, the aircraft carrier itself, it holds about 90
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 destroyers, 3 combat ships, and an aircraft carrier. Jesus.
Aircraft, F-18s, F-35s, a bunch of helicopters, and a bunch of electronic warfare planes. It's got a crew of 5,600 on the ship and in the air crew. So they're bringing over on these ships numbers that are similar to the numbers of planes that are being brought from continental U.S. and from Europe. And at this point now, it's over 200 fighter jets that we know of. 300 cargo loads of cargo plane loads have landed as well. And then on top of that, you have the entire Israeli Air Force as well, which virtually doubles this this military buildup. But you can see the escort ships that go.
Yeah, the Israeli Air Force has been crazy.
Alongside the Lincoln, those are guided missile destroyers, so those are also air defense. They are air defense for the carrier, but they also integrate into Israel's, which is also America's, missile defense array. So these ships are all a part of that as well. You can look at the next one, the USS Ford. USS Ford was just in Venezuela. They were part of the operation to kidnap Maduro from Venezuela and to oversee the attack.
And then another aircraft carrier is en route with 5 more destroyers. What in the fuck?
Random boats that are called drug boats, but we have no evidence of any of that given so far.
Right.
This ship, the Ford, it was in Europe for its deployment. The Trump administration called it back from Europe to carry out the Venezuela operation, which extended its time. And when it was in Venezuela, off the coast of Venezuela, it was their time at sea was extended again and had them sail back across the Atlantic. And we saw it pass through the Straits of Gibraltar and this is into the Mediterranean Sea on Friday. And again, this is a $13 billion aircraft carrier, 4,500 sailors. It's been at sea since the 24th of June, 2025, far beyond the normal 6-month deployments. And it carries as well F-18s, F-35s, electronic warfare planes as well, and it has 5 escort ships that you see here. So a significant naval force as well. And just a note on the USS Ford.
A $13 billion vessel. And weren't these like dropping, like, weren't these losing multi-million-dollar aircrafts off the side of them into the Red Sea? Hundreds of millions of dollars worth of taxpayer dollars are at the bottom of the Red Sea right now. Because they navigated a little too sharply with a $13 billion vessel. It's like talking about space. The numbers are so fucking out there, it's like hard to even wrap your fucking head around.
It has had serious problems with its toilet systems that have been overflowing, and that has been a consistent...
I was about to say, I bet them some stinky boys. They've been on there for so long. Recycling the same fucking water. Converting seawater. How do you, like, what do they... And their plumbing's all fucked up.
Something consistent with this carrier.
It's like a bad cruise.
Some overflow that you see here. So
imagine you're on the worst cruise possible, and you have military orders to do Nazi shit. No fun allowed.
A significant naval force as well. And just a note on the USS Ford, it has had serious problems with its toilet systems that have been overflowing, and
just a quick note,
something consistent with this carrier since at least March of last year. So the sailors themselves are talking to American media about being, stretched to their limits, wanting to quit being in the Navy because of these assignments. And trying to get their limits. So they have a bit of a side story going on with the USS Ford. The Ford pushed off from Greece today, heading to
the shitty Gerald Ford.
These ships well within range of Hezbollah's anti-ship missiles should this war become a regional war. We can see in these next few slides how we knew that the aircraft carrier, which flies dark, it flies in what's called ghost mode, sails in ghost mode. But you have here, this is a bird photographer on the Strait of Gibraltar who saw the USS Ford enter and pass through the Straits of Gibraltar. What you're seeing there, you can see Quetta in Morocco.
Yeah, good job, guys.
And the helicopter flying over it.
Real stealthy.
That's a photograph by David Parody. We can see another one as well here, again with the background. Massive ship, and so this research is all being done through various methods, through flight tracking.
We're in ghost mode, guys.
Photographers who
can't see
these ships. The footage that I showed you of the military assets at Ben Gurion Airport was taken out the window of a plane that someone saw. So putting together all of this information is remarkable, and it's something.
Going dark. Stay frosty, boys. Land photographer. God, that's so funny, man.
That is only could have been done in recent years with the development of flight tracking and whatnot. We got another one slide here from up closer. You can see the helicopters, and you can see it's bristled right out. That's all the fighter jets that are on the deck there. There's like 75.
Ooh, that's what they call bristled out. When it's got all its aircraft on deck. Damn.
Odd that are ready to be deployed at any moment. So again, these ships are doubling what's already doubling the carrier presence that was already there, and that's a look at one of the escort ships, guided missile destroyers. So interesting to mix these two, the flight tracking radar and just humans taking pictures. So let's take a look at number 16. You can see the assets spread out here. These are the number of assets that have been deployed so far. Again, the numbers are increasing. But you see the numbers of fighter jets, more than 200. That shows the ships on the bottom there that you're seeing. Those are Tomahawk cruise missiles that will be used, that were used in the 12-day war to attack Iranian nuclear sites. But you can see what their loadout is on those destroyers, guided missile destroyers that carry these Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles. So really bristling with a war posture. No other way to describe.
And if you kind of have an idea of how much each one of these things cost, this will help you like visualize like the overall cost to the taxpayer. You know what I mean? Like, you bought all these Tomahawk missiles. And if you're thinking, well, that's just the cost of defense, that's just the cost of freedom. Motherfucker, other countries have freedom and they don't do this. They don't spend this much on defense. And this is just targeted toward Iran. Over the 12-day war, this is a comprehensive list. Fucking bonkers, dude.
That. We're going to listen to a clip here in a moment from the United States Air Force Central Command Chief of Weapons and Tactics Major Claire Randolph, who talks about the complexity of maintaining operational security during Operation Midnight Hammer, where she was weapons and tactics officer during that 12-day war. A few weeks ago, she gave this presentation to the Mitchell Institute for Aerospace Studies that had a panel of Americans that were involved in the Midnight Hammer operation in June of last year to target Iranian nuclear sites. And she talks about some of the challenges of these buildups and executing the war plan. Let's listen to that, number 17.
I think a couple of critical challenges specifically for this mission included the major engineering challenge, which General Armacost already talked about. Then we had the force packaging challenge, which is the job. So that wasn't an unforeseen challenge, but it is really complex to do it over effectively a day-and-a-half period. And that's simply the job. So it's a challenge, but it's what we do. There are a couple of other challenges that sort of snuck up on us, I think. The first one I want to mention is OPSEC. We talked just now in the last panel about blue AI capabilities, but we didn't spend a lot of time talking about adversary AI capabilities or even civilian AI capabilities. I mean, you've got Twitter feeds of randos that are just studying where our airplanes go and publishing it, consolidating it. Like, if US analysts did some of that, we would consider it secret or maybe even top secret. But that stuff is just allowed on the open internet. So operational security, especially when you're talking about a transnational movement with hundreds of aircraft, is really, really difficult to conceal. So OPSEC is a really big concern.
So again, operational security is a big concern because of everything that I've shown you here on this show. So she says that the gist of what she says is that if military analysts did what we have presented on this show today, it would be considered top secret, classified material. But as it is, there's people all over the world tracking this 24/7, tracking this material and putting it out there. And that is what she considered a major concern to come out of Midnight Hammer. This presentation was weeks before the buildup in Iran, so she definitely was prescient in what the challenges are for the U.S. military. And one more, just the coup de grace here is Witkoff on the sidelines of the Board of Peace meeting that we showed you in the previous interview with Mohammed Shahada, that he left the Board of Peace, went over for this interview with Fox News, with Laura Trump, who just got a job on Fox News, and she interviews Witkoff about Iran. So let's listen to that. That's Stephen Witkoff you'll hear next.
We have red lines here from the U.S. How about over with Iran?
The president asked me that this morning, and I don't want to use the word frustrated. It's almost because he understands he's got plenty of alternatives. But it's curious. He's curious as to why they haven't, I don't want to use the word capitulated, but why they haven't capitulated. Why under this sort of pressure with the amount of sea power, naval power that we have over there, why they haven't come to us and said, we profess that we don't want a weapon, so here's what we're prepared to do. And yet it's hard to sort of get them to that place.
Well, there's that.
So that's the one thing about not having be a diplomat, is he's not diplomatic. He comes out straight out and says, my boss, Trump, is frustrated that the Iranians don't look at our power and surrender and just give up. He doesn't understand resistance or sovereignty. And I think that Witkoff captured that really well. Trump expected to send this big, beautiful armada, surely the biggest armada ever, sends it over, and he expects everybody to just lie down.
Did you hear what, right? Someone from Trump's family is now on Fox News? Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Big Deacons don't look be a diplomat, as he
was. Let's that we sure with understands he's
but over with Iran.
The president. That's Stephen Witkoff you'll hear next. Fox News. The Board of Peace went over for this interview with Fox News, with Laura Trump, who just got a job on Fox News, and she interviews Witkoff about.
Oh yeah, that's Laura Trump interviewing Steve Witkoff.
Iran. So let's listen to that. That's Stephen Witkoff you'll hear next.
We have red lines here from the U.S. How about over with Iran?
The president asked me that this morning, and I don't want to use the word frustrated. It's almost because he understands he's got plenty of alternatives. But it's curious. He's curious as to why they haven't, I don't want to use the word capitulated, but why they haven't capitulated. Why under this sort of pressure with the amount of sea power.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to leave it there. Oh, for fuck's sake. As if they weren't completely biased before. Yeah. If they can't control the media, they will become it. You know what I mean? So that's about all I can take. I think that catches us up for the week. I'm gonna process the VOD, post it on YouTube, and I will see you in Appalachia pretty soon. Peace.
Where's your fucking badge, you pigs? We go hard for Palestine. We escalate for Palestine. We fight for Palestine. We give it everything we got. We do not work with the police. We do not point people out to the police. We do not lay hands on our comrades. When we go hard for our people, you stand out the way. If you ain't with them, stand out.